Welcome to Module 4, Learn a Full Stack Application with the Prisma and Azure SQL, a full course. My name is Glaucia Lemos, and I am a cloud advocate in JavaScript at Microsoft. In this module, we are going to install all the necessary dev tools that we will going to need to develop our application on the backend side. Let's get started. So, what are tools we are going to using during our application development? So in order to develop the application on the backend side, we are going to use Node.Js, NPM, Azure Functions core tools in the version 4, Visual Studio Code, and some important Visual Studio Code extensions such as, for example, REST Client, Azure Tools Extensions, Azure Functions Extension, Remote Containers Extension, and finally Prisma extension. All the resources and links you can see here in the repository in the section resource used. For example, we are going to use the latest version of the Visual Studio Code and also the latest version of the Node.Js 16. If you're using a different version from 13 or 16, I will ask you to change to the latest version because Azure Functions core tools in the version 4X ask to use the Node.js 13 or 16. So try to use the latest version of the Node.js. Here you can see the Azure Functions core tools repository related with different operation systems, including the Windows 64-bit or even Windows 32-bit in different platforms here for Windows users. But you can also, for example, if you are a Linux user or Mac, you can use install the Azure Functions core tools using the NPM, but we are going to using the version 4. About the Visual Studio extensions, we are going to use Azure Tools because we can use the Azure portal inside in the Visual Studio Code, especially the Azure Functions, Azure Static Web Apps, or even Azure SQL inside in the Visual Studio Code. It's not necessary to go into the Azure portal, so we can use and manipulate everything related to some important Azure services inside in the Visual Studio Code. Also, we are going to use REST clients. REST client is similar to the Postman and Insomnia extensions. So if you want to test it out, some backend routes that we are going to creating right now, so you can test inside using this extension inside in the Visual Studio Code. We are going to talk a little bit more in the next video about dev containers. So I will ask you, all of you here, to install these extensions to deal with some, to develop some consistent, easily reproducible token around to the dev container, because Christopher Monet will going to teach us how to create some YAML file, how to create some Docker containers as well, just to prepare our application in the different ways as well. And finally, we are going to install the Prisma extension because also we are going to use Prisma, we need to use Prisma extensions because this extension will help us to. There's a lot of, for example, features, for example, syntax highlighting of schema, lighting, query completion, some documentations help, quick info on the hover, and even a formatting, because we are going to use a lot of during our development Prisma together with Node.js. So if you have any questions around to the code that we are going to starting to develop in the next module, or even about to the resources we are going to using during our development coding here right now, you can open an issue here in the repository. As soon as possible, we are going to answer your doubt or even question as soon as possible. So see you in the next video. Bye bye.